Diadwit, welcome back, guys. So, Conneda and the 3 golden apples of the Otherworld. We've just passed through Connacht in Western Ireland, an ancient Celtic kingdom in this part of the world, and it's named supposedly after King Con of the 100 Battles. So, for today's story, something a bit different. A lot of Irish mythology, like the one I told last week from the mythological cycle, or the Fenian cycle about Finn McCool, or the Ulster cycle. A lot of these stories and mythology and folklore, we have them because they've been written down usually by Christian scribes, which is great. Thank you, Christian scribes. But you can't help wondering if they haven't been altered slightly by the lens, the Christian lens with which they've been viewed through. Not so much this story, the story of Conneda, which is very much a pagan initiation story and a real glimpse right into the worldview, the imagination of the pre-Christian era. And the reason we have this story is because it's been passed down orally, like a lot of stories, but it's never been set down in writing in the Christian era in this country. It's been passed down by travellers, so it's got a bit of a sort of a homespun gypsy flavour to it, but still, I believe, preserves that that ancient medicine that a lot of these old stories contain. This therapy, if you like, this medicine, this what Joseph Campbell would have called a hero's journey or heroine's journey. The idea that the self undergoes many trials and tribulations over the course of one life, or many lifetimes, or many times in one lifetime, or one day even. And these allegorical tales can help us navigate the complexities of our lives and live with a greater sense of grandeur and beauty. So, my friends, while you're listening to this story, please see if any images ring out to you, and see if you can kind of find yourself anywhere in this story. Where are you now in this story? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this content on folklore and mythology and the interpretation of it, then do please give me a like and a subscribe, or why not follow me on Patreon. Now, to the story. I'm probably going to move location now because the farmer's just arrived in his combine harvester and is making quite a lot of noise. So I'll see you back in the van. Long ago, long ago, there was a king of Ireland, and his name was King Con, not King Kong. And he was the perfect ruler. He was strong, undefeatable in battle. Some called him Con of the 100 Battles, but he was also fair and just, a wise ruler, the ideal king. Now, he took a wife. Her name was Queen Eda of Brittany, and she was the ideal queen. She was kind, she was compassionate, and between them both, they had the perfect union. Now, my friends, as you probably know, in these stories, when the royal union is perfect, then the land itself is well. So during the reign of King Con and Queen Eda, everything was perfect. It was like the cow was made perfect. The rivers were filled with fish, the seas were teeming with cod, the harvest was plentiful, the skies were always blue, the sun was always shining, people were happy with the king and queen. They were like rivers to their people. And joyful, joyful, joyful day, the king and queen had a son, a beautiful little boy. And the Druids foretold that he would inherit the good qualities of both his mother and his father. So they decided, as you do, to combine their names and call him Conneda. So, Prince Con-eda. He was a delight to his mother and father, the apple of their eye. But he was also an absolute delight to the people of Ireland at the time. And these are mythic times, my friend. This island exists inside you and me, with all its rolling green hills and its salmon-filled rivers and its castles and princesses and monsters. All of that is taking place inside all of us right now. Now, Conneda was shaping up to be a fine young ruler. He was very, very skilled in all of the arts and all of the crafts, and he was also just a joy to be around. He was so courteous, so polite. He was an innocent. He was a good human, a golden child. But sad, sad, sad day to relate. The upward trajectory of Conneda would shortly be curtailed, because one sorry, sorry day, Queen Eda became very ill and died. And King Con had to take another wife. It wasn't really his choice, you see. The political machinations of these times meant that he had to take the daughter of his chief druid, a sour man, because if he didn't, things might not go well his way. So he had to take into his bed a woman that he did not really love, and she hated Prince Conneda. It was envy, you see, because she had been married before and she had children of her own. It's that wicked stepmother vibe we get in so many of these old tales. And she conspired to have Conneda put out of the picture so her own children could be placed on the throne of Connacht. So she started to foment rumours, did the new queen. But the thing is, Conneda was such a delightful child, a young teen now. He was completely above suspicion. Every time the queen tried to foment a little rumour, you know, set the rumour mill going, the seed of gossip and malintent would not take root, because Conneda was above suspicion. So she had to resort to other means, and resort to other means she did. What usually happens in these stories is the queen in question goes to visit a cunning woman, a druidess, a witch, a wise, dark woman that lives in a hut at the edge of town. Now, this woman's reputation preceded her. No one really knew how long she had been around. No one really even knew how old or young she was. She had just always been there. But she had the gift of prophecy and many magical charms at her disposal. So the queen visited this woman at the edge of things. The queen walked in disguise. She had put a cloak around her, walked quietly out the castle in the dead of night, and walked to this hut at the edge of things. She walked in, uncased herself, and that old woman was sat there by the fire. And she looked up and said, how do you, your majesty? And the queen was a bit taken aback by this, and that woman told her exactly why the queen had come. You want Prince Conneda out of your life forever. I get ya, and I can do that. But it'll cost you. No price is too high, said the queen. Well, that's a good thing then, said this cunning woman. The price will be this. I will put my distaff, my staff, in the peaty ground, and you have to fill the hole with grain, and then I'll tell you what you need to do. Sir, small task, said the queen. Well, be back tomorrow with the 20 cartloads of grain, said the witch. The queen thought that was a very strange thing to do, but no matter, she thought nothing of it. So the next day she arrived with 20 cartloads of grain, a little too much. And that woman walked onto the peat roof of her little hut and drilled a hole right through the roof with her staff and commanded the queen's servants to pour the grain through the hole, which obviously just kept filling up the cottage and the cellars below. interesting imagery there. Anyway, the queen was very, very, very put out by this. She was very grabby and possessive, and she was very, very annoyed that she had been tricked out of all these cartloads of grain by the cunning woman at the edge of things. But it was a small price to pay to get that little bastard out of her life, Conneda. So, upon when the druidess, the cunning woman at the edge of things, was satisfied, she gave the queen a certain object. It was a chessboard, an enchanted chessboard. The first game that the queen played on that chessboard, regardless of her skill, she would win that game. Can't say anything for the second or third or fourth game, but she would certainly win the first game. What am I going to do with this? Said the queen to the cunning woman. The cunning woman said, I thought you'd ask me that. She said, when you win the game against Prince Conneda, you will put him under geis. Now, for those of you that don't know, if there's anyone in Ireland watching or with Irish heritage or Irish connections, you might know what geis is. Sends a shiver up the spine. A geis is an obligation. This concept we sometimes have in the West of sticking by your word. It possibly has its origin in this Celtic concept. If you put someone under geis, they have to abide by the terms of the geis, under pain of death. Worse than death, they have to do it. So, the queen was to put young Prince Conneda under geis once she had won the first game of chess. The geis, the condition was to be this: Conneda would have to go to the king of the other world and steal 3 golden apples from his orchard, the black stallion from his stable, and the fairy hound from his kennels. And he must do this within a year and a day, or forfeit his right to the kingdom and be gone, exiled forever. When the queen heard this, she smiled, because nobody alive could possibly even gain entrance to the kingdom of the other world, let alone steal the hound, the apples, and the stallion from the king of that realm. So, the queen, rubbing her bony little hands together, went back to the castle and challenged the young, completely unsuspecting Prince Conneda to a wee game of chess. Conneda, who was, as I said earlier, very good at all things, including chess, happily agreed. Let's make this one a little bit more interesting, said the queen. If I win, I can put you under geis. If you win, you can put me under geis. Conneda said, well, there's no chance that I'll lose, because he knew how terrible his mother-in-law was at chess. So he agreed, and they set out the game and began to play. But a funny thing happened. You know, Conneda, whenever he thought about his moves, a few moves ahead, a fog descended. And whenever the queen made a stupid move, he went, ha-ha, to take the piece. But he found that the pieces weren't in the position that he had left them. And before he knew it, he had lost the game, and he was under geis. Well, said the queen, breaking into a smile, I want you, in a year and a day, to get from the king of the other world his fairy steed, his fairy hound, and the 3 golden apples that grow in his orchard. At that moment, Conneda knew he had been tricked. He had no inkling before. He was too innocent. Sometimes I think Conneda in this moment, he's like the fool in the tarot card, if you know that image. He's just walking off the edge of a precipice. He doesn't know what's ahead of him. Another game, he said. The queen, completely forgetting the warning of that cunning woman at the edge of things, said, yeah, I'll have another game. She wanted complete control over Conneda. But the magic of the chessboard only worked for the first match, and sure enough, in the second game, the queen was utterly decimated, and Conneda could now put his geis, his obligation, upon the queen, and it was this. He had no choice but to go for a year and a day in search of these fairy items, and would probably lose his life in the process. The queen, though, would have to, for that year and a day, remain imprisoned at the very top of the tallest tower in the palace, and subsist on nothing but a crust of stale bread and a cup of water each day for a whole year and a day, or until Conneda returned. The queen's mouth twisted at this. It would be a horrible ordeal for her, but at the end of a year and a day, she would be free of Conneda, and it would all be worth it. So, the queen was bound at the top of the tallest tower, chained, watching out over the horizon, and Prince Conneda, the very next day, through a veil of tears of his poor old father and all the assorted courtiers and the subjects of that land, set off on his white princely stallion. Now, he had no idea at all how to find these magical items of this quest, but he did have a bit of a clue. He had a bit of help. There was, at the edge of things, at the edge of the woods, an old hermit, a kind of solitary druid that he had made friends with in his younger days, and who kind of owed him a favour or two. So Conneda went first of all to the hut of this little druid, this little old wizened hermit, and told the hermit his dilemma, and said, "Is there anything you can do?" Well, the hermit consulted his various, knuckle bones and oracles and the entrails of birds and his gods and his lesser gods and his little fairy folk, but they came up blank. He didn't know how to help Conneda, but he did have a clue as to who might be able to help. It was this: the bird of the human head. The bird of the human head that dwells in a far-off mountain and is set to appear in 3 days' time. And I hear tell that the bird is 3 days' ride away. Here, you must take this shaggy horse of mine outside my hut. Don't take your princely stallion, but this shaggy, old, beaten-up, brown mare, and ride to the bird of the human head and present it with, ta-da, this jewel, and it will tell you the way. So Conneda left his princely steed and got on this crappy, shitty horse with all long tousled hair and all brown and all tiny like a Shetland pony. Very, very unregal thing. And he took the jewel of the hermit and said, "Thank you very much. I will, I hope, be back." And off he went. Clip, clop, clippity clop, clip, clop, clop, clip, clip, clop, clop, clip, clop, on this very, very mongrelly horse. But this horse, it wouldn't really obey where he wanted it to go. It wasn't like his well-trained steed. So he just, get this, let the reins go. He just let the reins loose on the neck of that horse, and it just trotted wherever it wanted to go. He relinquished control and let his instinct guide him. His instinct being that shaggy little horse. And it clip-clopped, clip-clopped, clip-clopped all over Ireland, through forests, over hills, along streams, along beaches, until finally they came, almost 3 days later, to the foot of a mountain. And that horse just clip-clopped up that mountain, and there was a crag, and there, sure enough, in some wild, desolate place, was a magnificent bird, still like a statue, and it had a human head with 2 faces facing each direction and 3 eyes. One for past, one for present, one for future, because sure enough, this was the bird that knew all things. But its face was like stone until Conneda took the jewel out of his breast pocket, and then its eyes suddenly flashed open, all three of them, and it swooped down, took the jewel in its claw, and then went back to its impossible perch up on the peak of that mountain with Conneda below, and it looked down imperiously at Conneda with its eyes flashing and said, "Ah, Conneda, Prince of Ireland, I know why you have come. You seek the fairy stallion, the fairy hound, and the 3 golden apples from the orchard of the king of the Otherworld. I will tell you how to find them. Look underneath the right hoof of your horse." And that horse lifted up its hoof, and there was a rock there. Conneda got down off his horse, lifted up the rock, and there was a golden cup and an iron ball. Then the bird said, "The cup you will know what to do with soon enough. The ball, throw it in front of you and follow wherever it goes." This is a very old mythic concept. Think Theseus's ball of twine in the labyrinth in the underworld. So Conneda got back on his shaggy horse with no reins, threw that ball in front of him. It went dunk, 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 and then started rolling. Just started rolling over hill and over glen. It rolled through little streams, rolled up hills, defying gravity, but mainly it rolled down through the dales, down through the valleys, on and on and on and on. Conneda followed that iron ball, rolling to the heart of things, to the source of things, until finally it reached the shores of a vast loch, a vast lake. Some say this is Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland, the largest body of fresh water in these islands. So big you can't even see from one side to the other. It's like a sea, even bigger than Lough Neagh. It's huge and dark and foreboding. And that ball rolled right in there. And that little horse, clip, clop, just stopped at the shores. And that little horse just looked at him. And Conneda looked back at it, and then that horse spoke. It said, "We'd better go in then." Conneda said, "Yeah." And that horse trotted in, its hooves going into the water, deeper into the cold water of the loch, following that ball. And Conneda was floating up and grabbing hold of the mane of that horse while it walked in, holding his breath, and they walked through the water, down through the sludgy slope, until they came out the other side and were trotting down a slope again. This is a very common theme in Celtic mythology, a doorway into another world through a lake, because as Conneda, riding his little horse, trotted down that slope, the whole firmament, the whole roof of heaven was above him, and it was water, and the sun was just shining through that water, creating a dappled pattern on his skin and on this whole new world that was before him. He'd entered the other world. And they trotted along and then came to that ball that was just still there. And that horse turned around to Conneda again and said, "Well done. Well done, Conneda. We've crossed the first threshold." Talking horses, very common theme in Celtic mythology. Now, the horse wasn't done though. The horse said to Conneda, "Here is my first piece of advice. Reach into my ear, my left ear, and pull out a bottle of heal all that is in there." Conneda reached into that horse's ear and pulled out a vial, a bottle of healing potion. "Now reach into my other ear," said the horse. And Conneda did so and pulled out a basket. "Now, let's go on, and you must obey my advice exactly." And Conneda agreed. So that little horse trotted on, trotted on. The horse is leading the way now. Conneda is just a passenger in his own adventure. So they trot along, and that little ball starts moving again and is leading the way on and on and on, until in the middle of this great magical plain of wonder they come to a great river that's completely cutting across the whole thing, and a causeway of stones leading over it. And there in the middle of the river are three huge serpents, spitting venom and poison and frothing at the mouth and belching and going ah, ah, ah. And their names are greed and hatred and delusion, and there is no possible way across that causeway. But that little horse said, Conneda, open the basket that you took out of my ear. Inside there are some pieces of meat. Throw the scraps of meat into the mouths of these serpents, but make sure that your aim is absolutely precise and unerring, and there is no fear or hesitation when you throw the meat. Conneda said, okay then, and he threw one after the other. 2, 3, and those serpents gobbled down that meat. And then that little horse leapt over the gnashing jaws of those serpents, and Conneda could only just hold on. And that horse looked back to Conneda and said, Conneda, have you still got hold of my neck? And he said, just about. And he landed on the other side of the river and kept trotting on. Whew! First trial over, the trial of water, the trial of serpents. Now, before long came the trial of fire. Conneda, with his little shaggy steed, came across a great mountain with a great gap in it, spouting fire, a huge volcano belching smoke and sulphur and fire into the sky below the sky. Now, there was no other way across, and that little shaggy horse said to Conneda, I'm going to jump. I will jump over, and you have to hang on tight. Show no fear, Conneda. Conneda held on tight, and that horse leapt right over the flames, right over the smoke, and that volcano just belched up a load of flame, and it burnt all the clothes off Conneda's back, and burned his skin, burned the hair off his head, 3rd-degree burns all over. He was singed, and only just hanging on with his scabby little pink hands to his shaggy steed. And then that horse landed on the other side of that fiery mountain. The horse turned back. Are you still alive, Conneda? Just barely, said Conneda. Well, drink the bottle of heal-all, said the horse. And Conneda drank that bottle down and smeared that healing balm, and by magic the burns on his skin just healed right up, and his hair grew back, and maybe even his clothes pieced back together, I don't know. And he had overcome the trial of fire. Trotting on, Conneda and his little steed, eventually they came to a ruin of a castle on a shore of a body of water. This, said Conneda's good friend and shaggy little horse, was the palace of the fairy king. But it is guarded by sentinels, by fairy guardians, hooded things that move behind the walls. And if you try and go in alone, in the form you are now, a human, you will surely be eviscerated by a laser beam from one of their eyes, just like a Bala of the Baleful Eye in the story I told last week. You cannot pass in this form. I will tell you what you need to do. Well, you've never failed me before, said Conneda to his shaggy, talking friend, his horse. Reach into my ear, then, said the horse. In there you will find a knife. Take out that knife and cut off my head and skin me. Wear my skin and walk into the palace, and they will do you no harm. What the fuck are you talking about? Said Conneda. I'm not going to do that. You're my best friend. I can't kill you. You have to do it, or truly we will both die. I'm not doing it, said Conneda. It goes against everything I stand for as a prince, as a human being. I can't kill you. You're my best friend. Well, said the horse, I'm sorry to say that this is where we part ways. But if you can do what I've asked, I promise you, things will be better than you can possibly imagine. And have I ever let you down before? Conneda had to agree that no, his steed had never let him down before. So, trembling, he reached into that horse's ear and pulled out a knife, and tears in his eyes, held it up to that horse's neck. That was all he needed to do, because propelled by some energy, that knife thrust forward right into that horse's neck, cut off its head. And weeping, Conneda flayed the skin off his best friend that he had ever known, his best companion, his best guide, and put that horse's skin on his own self, and walked through the gates of that fairy ruin. Past the gates, things had transformed. It was not a ruin, it was a palace of wonders, a courtyard of dazzling crystal and gold and gems, great domes, great spires. The sentinels didn't even see Conneda wearing the skin of his one-time best friend and companion, and he went straight to the centre of that courtyard, where there was a fountain. The fountain of youth, the fountain of life, the fountain of healing. And then he heard a little voice in his head. It was the voice of his horse, and it said, "Fill the cup, the golden cup that you brought with you from underneath the rock of the bird with the human head, remember, and bring it back out to me." So Conneda filled the cup, tears still in his eyes, still as if in a dream, walked back out of those gates, and he saw the flayed corpse of his friend that he had flayed himself, and the crows and birds were circling down, pecking at it. He shooed them away and just poured some drops from his golden cup from the fountain of healing on that horse, and sure enough, it sprang back to life, but not in the form of a horse, in the form of a fairy prince. Human in form, beautiful. And for all the world, it was like Conneda was looking in a mirror. It was like his brother, his twin from another life. Because perhaps that's exactly what he was. It was the horse's true form, his fairy form. And he began to tell Conneda all about how he had been trapped in the form of that shaggy little horse by an evil druid, the very same evil druid that had married off his daughter to Conneda's father back in the court. But the condition, the geish of my encapsulation in shaggy horse form was broken when you, Conneda, did the things that you have done today. For that I thank you. If you had not killed me, I would not have been saved. Now, go back into the fairy castle, because the fairy king, get this, is my own brother, and he's been waiting long and hard for this day. He will give you the 3 golden apples from his orchard. He will give you the black steed from his stable, and he will give you the fairy hound from his kennel. And you will take those, my dear, dear, dear brother, from another life, from another universe, Conneda, you will take them back home, because your dad is missing you very much. And also, you'll meet my sister there. So, Conneda went into the fairy palace, again, this time with his companion, to great fanfare. The sentinels could see him now. I cannot tell you what feasting happened in that place, but it was a rather wonderful thing to behold. And at the end of these days of feasting that seemed to last many, 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 many years, Conneda was, of course, given the 3 golden apples. These are the apples of immortality. The apples, Idun's apples from the garden that keep the Norse gods alive. The apples from the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. The 3 golden apples that we all hold inside all of us. The 3 golden apples were given to Conneda. And the black steed from the fairy king's stable. And the fairy hound from his kennel. And with these precious gifts, Conneda and went back through the waters of all the way back, this time riding a princely black steed. And then he arrived back to his kingdom, but sorry to report, it was not a place he had recognized. Things were not well in the kingdom. The king, ailing, sad, growing old, meant therefore that the land also ailed. The sea was not filled with fish, lambs were stillborn, the grain would not ripen. Things were not good in the kingdom. Things were not good. Invasive species, global warming, lack of biodiversity, you know the score. Anyway, when Conneda came over the horizon, riding that black steed with that fairy hound behind him, holding those 3 golden apples in his hand and light seeming to shine out of his eyes, the queen, the wicked stepmother queen, spied him coming on the very last day of his trial, a year and a day later. I don't know how much time elapsed in the fairy realm. She saw that and screamed, "No!" and threw herself from the tallest tower and smashed herself to bits on the floor. And the king heard rumours that his son had returned, and Prince Conneda planted those 3 golden apples in the king's own orchard, and immediately grew into a great apple tree filled with golden apples, and the birds came and nested in it, and the fish returned to the streams and the rivers and the seas, and the lambs fucking started frolicking in the meadows. The king was like a man 20 years younger again, and embraced his son. And there, standing underneath the tree, was that old cunning woman at the edge of things. Remember her? The one that had sent, that had given the queen that chessboard at the beginning of the story, and inadvertently sent Conneda on that adventure for the steed and the hound and the apples, because in so doing she freed her own brother from his gate, because she was sister to the king of the fairy realm, of course. So, my friends, she went back to the fairy realm, and Conneda, after his father had passed away, a happy man, became king of all Ireland, or at least Western Ireland, Connacht. And if the realm of King Kong and Queen Eda was a blessed one, the realm of King Conneda, the reign of King Conneda, was even better. So the story of Conneda and the golden apples, a very, very old story, but one that is almost textbook in its archetypal pattern, its journey. You might call it the hero's journey. That's an idea by Joseph Campbell, borrowing ideas from Carl Jung. But it's almost textbook, that story, and it fits it exactly, this hero's journey narrative that applies to Gilgamesh, to Odysseus, to Luke Skywalker. It's all there. So that story, you've got the call to adventure with the chessboard, you've got meeting the mentor, the old hermit, you've got the journey into the other world, you've got the trials and tribulations, the snakes, the mountain of fire, you've got the literal death and rebirth, and then the return as well. So all there in that archetypal pattern that we all go through over the course of our lives. And that's what these myths, I believe, are for, or were originally intended for. They're to sort of help us find greater meaning in our lives. Joseph Campbell is great. If you haven't heard of him, do check him out. But there is a problem, I feel, with getting too academic with these stories, and that is very pertinent to this particular story. So I'm not going to do that too much, because you're all very intelligent people. And also, these myths, they work on a different kind of level. They're not head-based things. They sort of work with the images of the collective unconscious, with the deep psyche, with the deep mind, with that kind of imagery. That's sort of the level they work on. So I would be really interested if any of these images, like I said at the beginning, resonate with you. Then let me know in the comments or write to me, because that might just be a clue that something. You're at a particular juncture in your life. Maybe you're at the chessboard moment. Maybe you're at the body of water about to go down. Maybe you need to let go of the reins a little bit But just a few things to talk about, just briefly, with this story, because it is very, very interesting with this story. This idea of the horse, the talking horse, the horse that leads its own way. I think that's such an important thing with contemporary Western culture, where we are all too head-based. I am, personally. You know, we love to dissect and put things in boxes, reduce things, pick things over, you know. Sometimes in the contemporary West, I think we need to just lead with the gut a little bit more, and not too much with the head. And I think that is what the imagery of the shaggy horse and following the iron ball is sort of all about. It's a very Irish thing, really, isn't it? You know, just go with your heart, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's sort of a medicine to a lot of the ills of the contemporary Western mindset, I think, this story, a lot of these old stories. Also, just the idea of getting rid of the ego, getting out of the way. The idea that Conneda, he's like an innocent in the world, and he has to, he's sort of got to reintegrate or integrate the darkness a little bit, the human shadow, and kill his own ego. That's what killing that shaggy horse is all about. I feel, in some ways, it's sort of his self, his little self that he's getting rid of in order to access something deeper, something much greater. There's something like that. There's some mystic old wisdom encoded in this strange story that is in a lot of these stories. Anyway, if you like this content on myth and folklore, then do please give me a like and a subscribe. I've also got a Patreon account. I've put the descriptions in the comments. It starts at about $3 a month. If you pay $12 a month, then you'll get a nice wooden spoon like this one, or perhaps slightly larger. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you again soon.